I've got Tiffy with me today to talk about everything that's happening in Latin America and particularly the Latino community here in Australia. Tiffy, how are you?
Very well. How are you going?
Yeah, really well. What's the latest? New year, there's been some new political change in Latin America. What's kind of the situation on the ground at the moment across the whole continent?
Across the whole continent, there might be different countries experiencing very different things. My background is Argentinian. So from an Argentinian point of view, I think the political landscape has been guiding a major shift in a really good direction. So there's been already 12, 13 months of a new president, and the real estate market has finally started picking up. During the pandemic, real estate market had fallen around 40%, and it has been really, really, really slow. Like when you think about a slow market in Australia, that does not compare to a slow market in Argentina. So finally, inquiries, sales are picking up, and people are starting to feel that urgency. And it's just the whole market sentiment that has shifted from a political, economical, and it falls into real estate. And then that translates in different countries, different things. I caught up yesterday with a friend who's from Venezuela, and he was telling me, not necessarily related to the real estate market, but he's like, I want to actually go and visit Venezuela after like 15 years because finally it's safer. And I think people are in different countries are starting to feel that improvement when the government changes in a more liberal direction, right? Not every country is going through that though.
Yeah. Okay, let's stick to Argentina and let's wind back a little bit. Let's go
Yes.
back 10, 20 years.
Correct.
What we see here as Australians is a whole wave of migration. But what are the reasons? What happened in Argentina? For people that don't know, what happened to get to the point that it got to? We know it's improving, but pre-getting to that point.
A lot happened. In summary, I was born, and the first 12 years of my life, I was raised in an environment that one Argentinian peso was equivalent to $1. And that meant that every time that we traveled overseas, it was really cheap for us, right? It was a strong market, strong economy. And all along across last many years, all real estate has been transferred in US dollars in Argentina. So everything works in US dollars. Now, that one peso, $1 wasn't genuine. And a very big recession came in 2001, where from one day to the next, money was converted. So if you had money in the bank, and it was in US dollars, they basically converted to the peso, and it was worth 25%, 1/4. And at that point in time, businesses went broke, poverty started increasing, people were losing jobs. Like if the GFC was a big deal around the world, this was probably worse than the GFC for Argentinians, right? And with that in mind, again, you start not from zero, you start from minus 100. If you had a business or real estate or anything, because everything you built, you're sort of losing it. My dad had developed a whole building in a really, really nice place. They lost it and they were in debt. So they had to rebuild that business. And then as you touch rock bottom, you start improving. And the improvement took many years, but probably the best years in Argentina would have been going from 2005 till just before the GFC. And then the GFC comes and that impacts as well. And then you start again, and probably best years would have been from like 2012 growth till the pandemic. And then pandemic arrives. And very different to developed economies where the real estate markets went really strong with low interest rates. No one gets lending in Argentina because inflation is ridiculous. Interest rates are tied to inflation. There's no lending really. So whereas in developed markets, you saw a really, really strong real estate market for like 2021, 2022, in most economies in Latin America, they've been trying to start to recover from the loss that came with COVID-19.
So how bad does it get? I mean, tell me a little bit about where Argentina was in terms of its place in Latin America, pre things getting bad, and then how bad does it get from your perspective as an Argentinian now living in Australia?
It gets really bad when you are in the top 3 of inflation around the world. And like when we surpassed Venezuela, that was like, wow, that's a shocker. You're being compared to the poorest of countries in Africa and around the world. So I think the worst was reaching 150% annual inflation, which means that nothing works because you want to go to the supermarket, out for dinner, or even have a business and get supply of anything. And there's no prices. No one knows what things are worth. No one wants to sell you anything because they don't know how much it will cost them to replace the stock, right? So essentially, it's really hard. No one wants to develop. People who have US dollars, cash, they don't want to spend them. They just keep them, really. So I don't even know that I have experienced the very worst. I migrated in 2015. That was 10 years ago. And I didn't live through 150% inflation. So every time that I've gone back visiting, I don't know what things are worth. And I cannot even convert. It doesn't make sense. So you're on this whole, let's wait and see, but it just gets really bad.
So you leave Argentina 10 years ago,
Yeah.
You come to Australia. Tell me about what's happening in your peer group, in the millennials that are growing up in that environment. What are they kind of thinking and what do they actually do?
Yeah, completely new generation to the prior ones. I know that in different places around the world, it's pretty common for people when they finish school to move out of their parents' house and go interstate into uni and just leave your home. In Argentina, that was never a thing. If you were born and raised mainly in the capital cities where you have access to universities, you stay there. And I belong probably to the first generation where from all of my groups of friends, half of them are no longer in Argentina. And you've just gone anywhere and everywhere. And that's very, very different because what we've known all of our lives is actually Argentina was just like Australia, a place where after World Wars I and II, Europeans migrated to. And you hear this story all the time. I got the choice of going to Australia or to Argentina. And some people chose one or the other and your lives would have looked very different. And essentially, you have people who, most of Argentinians, for them, they feel it's never going to be in their cards to buy a property because for maybe high end, like you have classes, whereas here you don't have middle class versus high class. And if you are not in the highest earner group of people, it's really hard to get any support and help and be able to purchase something. So I know Australians here believe that we're living a housing crisis. And for my generation, how will they ever buy a property in Australia? Most migrants can, and they're willing to do what Australians don't want to do, which is I'm willing to enter the more affordable part of the market. If I cannot buy my home in Sydney, let's buy an investment, enter the market, and then work our way up. And whereas that's not even an option in Argentina. So from my group of friends, you've either received help from your friends or you'll never buy a property and you just spend the money in trips, essentially.
We'll get to the property experience here in Australia, but I just want to dig in deeper to paint the picture of how tough things got. And then this generation that's migrating, starting from, say, 10, 15 years ago. Is this just happening in Argentina or is it happening to neighboring countries? What's happening across the whole continent around the time that you're thinking, let me look abroad?
It's happening all across the continent, especially because from where we're standing right now, we talk to Latin American clients every day, and we are seeing so many people from Colombia, from Chile, more and more from Mexico. We've seen a lot of Peruvians, a lot of Brazilians. So there's definitely something across most countries. And if you're thinking about levels of development within countries in Latin America, you would expect Chile to be a pretty developed, one of the most developed countries and doing better economy-wise. And you're still seeing a lot of them migrate.
So it's happening in Chile. It's happening obviously in the northern part of the continent. They're
Of course.
migrating up into the United States,
Yes.
those that can. And that's been very politicized over the past couple of years, I
Yeah.
think because of the volume. But we've been seeing that trend. And in Australia, people don't necessarily see that, right? It kind of goes under the radar because we're used to the Indian and the Chinese and the Filipino and the Vietnamese migration. How big is the migration of Latin Americans into Australia, and what does your typical Latin American migrant coming to Australia look like in terms of their jobs, their aspirations, their professions, and their behaviors?
So, going to the first part of that question, I have seen Australia become more and more trendy all across Latin America. So, volumes are increasing as much as the government will allow it to. And the best example I can give is I've been living in the same apartment for 9.5 years. And I used to walk around the eastern suburbs, depending where you were. And it wasn't common to hear other Spanish speakers around me. Maybe in Bondi Beach, but not in the rest of the eastern suburbs. Nowadays, I cannot do like more than 20 meters without hearing someone around me speak Spanish. And that has been growing and growing. Of course, during the pandemic, we had borders shut down. That was a stop. But then the borders opened and massive influx of people. And when you think about the typical people that come, I think there is two very different types of people coming. There's a big part that is looking to build their better life here and have all of the opportunities that they didn't have back home. So they come here very much focused on how can I get a visa that will allow me to stay in Australia, so get my permanent residency and start building a proper, stable income, start thinking after I secured my visa about if I'm saving money, how can I start investing money? And I want to build my wealthy life in the future, right? There is another part of Latin Americans that actually are looking just for an experience. And the experience is, let me just do jobs that most Australians don't want to do. I'm still earning a lot more money than I would back home, even working in a corporate job. So they're highly skilled people. You have everyone's an engineer, everyone's like done full on university degrees, but they're like, I was maybe burnt out. I'm looking to earn good money to keep traveling. And that's a big part.
And tell me why Australia is becoming higher up that list, because traditionally it's been the US, it's been Europe, right? What are the things that Australia has going for it that we as Aussies don't sometimes appreciate as much as someone coming from Latin America?
Number one, it's safety, feeling safe when you're walking on the streets, that you can leave your backpack at the beach and hopefully it will stay there and no one's going to touch it. And it took me a really, really, really long time to switch my mind to not just hop on the streets when a car comes next to me, right? Like I wouldn't want to walk past 7 p.m. in certain areas in Argentina. And it took me probably 9 months to relax and believe that I don't have to be minding my things, essentially. And when you think about the US, it's gone in a direction where you have not that much safety, right? It's better than Argentina, for sure it is, or Latin America, but it has a lot of problems when it comes to safety.
So are Argentinians seeing that? Are Latin Americans kind of looking at the US and looking at Europe and saying, okay, it's a bit, the perception of the US and Europe's different than what it was 10 years ago?
Definitely. And even Europe has, I want to say that Europe comes for the south part of Latin America. Europe comes before US because there's been so many migrants. A lot of people my age have European passports, which makes it a lot easier to land in Europe. And I have a sister living in Spain. And I wouldn't say from all of the stories that I hear that I can consider Spain a developed country. Again, a bit better than Latin America. Yes, maybe. But when it comes to, like, you don't expect to have a gun pointed at you that's better. But then my sister has already had a few iPhones gone, and you have to be mindful of your things, and salaries are not as high as Australia. It's pretty tough conditions. So no country is perfect. They have a great vibe. Like if people are looking for something that has a lot more vibrant nightlife, then yeah, you want to go to Barcelona, not Sydney, of course. But then the downside is that you're not in that safety, high-paying job.
Very good perspective. And I think, sometimes as Australians, we don't appreciate that. We don't appreciate how good we've got it and what's required to keep it that good. And I want to now come into Wealthi. Tiffy's the CEO at Wealthi. She does an amazing job helping Latin American clients invest in Australia. You're building an amazing team. Tell me a little bit about your journey at Wealthi and kind of where the business is at and where the business is going and the value that Wealthi is providing to Latin American clients.
So Wealthi originally was directed at Australians, English speaking, and we started sensing that Latin Americans were better at saving, were willing to forgo the Australian dream of, I want my dream home. I'm willing to be smart about it and start by first buying the property that I can actually afford, especially in a high interest rate period. And that's how we started. So I think it's been now a 5-year journey. And at one point, through content, more and more clients and referrals, I feel the proudest from the team, first being proud about what we're doing and everyone having that sense of I'm doing something great for my community. But then when our clients that have bought one property are coming back to us for second and third property, after 5 years, we've gotten that experience. It was really hard in year one. So right now what we're seeing is we're actually in that growth phase of how can we keep helping. And as our clients have grown in their investment journey, we're trying to deliver not just a better experience, but also we're now adding more advanced investment opportunities, right? So we're growing as our clients are growing as well.
And what are the Latin American clients that you work with buying? What's kind of the markets that they like? What's the product that they like? What are the price points that they like?
So they love a price point that goes currently early 2025. We're seeing that $650,000 to $1 million. That's the sweet spot for our clients. And the preferred market is by far Melbourne. There's a few reasons for this. I want to start by saying that even during 2024, where market sentiment was at a low, let's call it, because of high interest rates, because we were coming from managing inflation and Latin Americans understand inflation, and the only way you protect in Latin America the value of your hard-earned money is through bricks and buying property, then market sentiment was quite low for Australians in general, whereas Latin Americans were like, if I have money, I'm putting it in real estate because I want to protect my money against inflation. So right now, we are seeing a lot of value in the price gap that there's been between Melbourne and Sydney. You're seeing Melbourne prices 30 to 40% discount versus Sydney. And Melbourne or Sydney are the only tier 1 cities from a population, employment, infrastructure type of point of view. And Latin Americans understand that there is an opportunity in that price gap and they're willing to be smart and buy at a discount. Latins love a discount. Mm-hmm. That's essentially what they're saying. Yeah.
And there's a big stigma in Australia at the moment, which is incorrect. And I'm going to be breaking it down over the next few months, that foreign investors are the reason and the problem behind our housing market. And I actually think it's the opposite. Foreign investors are the solution, because when foreign investors come in, they're on their pathway to becoming an Australian, first and foremost. So they're making a commitment to investing in the country. And secondly, they're usually investors rather than owner-occupiers. And when they buy an investment property, they're putting that into the rental pool, and that's increasing rentals for everybody. Tell me about kind of the clients that are not yet permanent residents or not yet citizens, the foreign investors. Are they also going into Melbourne or are they going into other markets?
They're going into other markets. So I want to say probably if you're thinking about purchasing residential property in Australia and you are classified as a foreign investor, there's two big considerations. You have to apply for the FIRB, which is the Foreign Investment Review Board. And you're going to be looking at brand new properties, not established. And then you want to consider whether or not in the state or territory that you're purchasing, if there is any stamp duty surcharges. And ACT is the one territory in Australia that gives you the benefit for foreign investors where you don't have that 8% surcharge, essentially. And across Australia, we've been hearing for the last few years how little supply there is for renters and purchasers. So the fact that foreign investors are buying property and putting it in the market for people to be able to rent, I think that's amazing. And I own 8 properties and I'm an investor and I rent where I want to live. So to me, it's great that someone else purchased a property in a place where I want to live and I'm trying to do the same, right?
Yeah, and you're an Aussie now.
Yeah, I am.
So you've got the right as an Aussie to talk about this. But what's your kind of message to those people that feel like foreign investors are the problem?
There's a lot that a migrant can contribute to a country, and it comes from many different points of view. In the workforce, you'll have a lot of people doing jobs that they are adding value, either creating jobs or jobs that Australians don't want to do. And then from an investment point of view, I think everyone's trying to have a positive impact. It's been hard to come from another country to find your new place that will be your home, create your new group of friends, find a job, stability, visa, etc. And you're simply trying to contribute and give back because Australia has given back, has given us a lot, really.
Absolutely.
So for me, is every time that I've purchased a property, even like I've purchased brand new properties and established ones. And I've made established properties that weren't in livable conditions finally livable. So they were just empty, doing nothing in a market. And now I was like, okay, I've made these a great place for someone to be living in. And there's definitely ways you can think about it. In one of my properties, I was really interested in trying to support the elder community and a lot of people going into their 60 plus that have no housing. And I was trying to encourage my property manager to go to that local community place and find tenants that like we're struggling and put tenants in place. So for instance, something small that has just one bed and someone who's living by themselves, they don't need an extra bedroom. Like those are the things that I've been considering. And yes, I'm a citizen, but I'm also a migrant.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're lucky to have migrants like you. And, you know, my last question is, as a leader, what have you learnt about yourself and what are kind of some of the lessons that you're taking into 2025?
I've learned that every time that I've had to go through a hard situation, I built resilience. And some migrants will see that as something negative, that you have to pay the price and it's hard at the beginning, and it is hard. But I also think that if you use the tough moments to go further in life, I think that's what you have going on for you. And I see that as my advantage. And going into 2025, I'm trying to give more and more back to the community, right? So Australian community and even Latin American community, I feel passionate about my community as well. So essentially where I'm coming from is sometimes when you're living through tough times, it's hard. Just think that you're building the resilience to get really far in life.
Great words. Well done, Tiffy. I'm really proud of what you're building at Wealthi, really proud of the community and the team, and really proud that as Australians, you know, we have a lot of great Latin Americans that want to come here and call Australia home. We're blessed, and thank you. And I'm looking forward to having you on during the year.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tiffy.